I came out here today because people are having trouble buying food and paying rent and paying for their mortgages. We're being taxed again, and more people are falling behind. They can't keep up. I'm standing here for the people who can't be here because we deserve to have our rights to peacefully protest.
This video is brought to you by people who like, share, and subscribe to this channel. You can also support my work by buying me a coffee. The Fellowship of Guelphissauga continues with the national protest to axe the inflationary carbon tax. From the prairies to the East Coast, Canadians were fed up with the Lord of the Liberals' ever-increasing carbon tax. They took to the highways at border crossings to protest until the tax gets axed, and they were getting the attention of the RCMP. Meanwhile in the Shire, the mayor had his own tax problems to deal with from flexing his strong mayor powers. But that didn't bother Lord of the Longfields and the other 2,300 public sector sunshine listers while they filled their gas tanks with their ever-increasing paychecks. Can't Carly of Klassen and the Elder Elves do anything about the housing cost crisis? And will the carbon tax get axed? Across the nation, people were fed up with the Lord of the Liberals' carbon tax. Earlier this week, it increased by 23% from $65 per ton to $80. Compounded on top of all the other income, consumption, and hidden taxes, the inflationary carbon tax was all economic pain with no environmental gain. In a survey of 1,800 people, 70% of them said their plan to deal with the carbon tax hike was to stop eating. The people had had enough and took to the streets to axe the tax. They peacefully assembled at highways and border crossings to protest against the inflationary carbon tax. In the lands of Ontario, the Axe the Tax protesters took the local highways and overpasses. They peacefully protested by waving their Canadian flags and protest signs at passing traffic. Like a coordinated convoy, they simultaneously protested in Ottawa, Kitchener, Hamilton, and St. Catharines. Unlike the protests with the non-Canadian flags, they weren't waving any weapons or smashing any bus shelters, so the police didn't have to get involved and deliver coffee. They peacefully protested until it got the attention of the big blue orc in the swamps of Toronto. He awoke from his buck-a-beer slumber and eventually replied. Earlier that day, in Alberta time, which is super early, the proud prairie protesters joined the fight to axe the carbon tax. They prepared for the protest by not only waking up early, they also brought food, trailers, horses, and porta potties for their multi-day standoff at border crossings. Little did they know who they were standing off against to axe the taxed, as out of the blue, some federal thugs showed up to intimidate the prairie protesters. In Cochrane, Alberta, a gang of armed thugs lined the highway perimeter to monitor the situation. Armed with weapons, guns, and no name tags or ID, they squared off against the peaceful protesters on the side of the highway. They filmed everyone there with their camera, so that way they could ID the protesters, but not themselves. The Axe the Tax protests spread from the prairies to the East Coast. Later that day, the East Coast joined the protest at the New Brunswick and Nova Scotia border. they also had to face off with the federal thugs who blocked traffic to prevent their protest. Eventually, all the protesting and federal standoffs caught the attention of the Big Blue Orc and other premiers. The premiers of Saskatchewan, Alberta, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland and Labrador have all urged the Lord of the Liberals to cancel the carbon tax hike. In Ontario, the Big Blue Orc replied bluntly, "Let's cut to the chase. This carbon tax has to go, or in a year and a half the Prime Minister is going. It's as simple as that. He will be going. I guarantee you, he will not be there." But for now, the Axe the Carbon Tax prairie protesters remain determined, since they brought porta potties and enough food for 3 weeks. They don't know how long the standoff will last until they get to axe the tax. Meanwhile, back in the Shire, the mayor dealt with his own peaceful tax protests. Not only was an axe the tax protest happening at the Westwood Bridge over the Hanlon, there was also the tax sign guy downtown, as usual, reminding us of the huge incoming tax increases in the Shire. The mayor was trying to flex his strong mayor powers against the tax protesters, similar to the tent encampment downtown, by cutting next year's tax increase to make things a little less worse. He reviewed the Corporation of the Shire's books to see how things were going. Luckily, the seasonal numbers were looking good for the mayor to keep his promise for tax cuts next year. For the winter snowplow operations, the budget was only 30% spent so far, instead of the normal 45% at this time of the year. With the milder winter, he could spend 50% less on salt, sand, and other materials applied to the roads. The clear roads also helped with building the 3 new redundant bicycle signals added this year for all those winter road warriors out there. The mayor was excited about getting lucky with these numbers and wondered how far he could flex his strong mayor powers. He wondered if he could flex it all the way to a 0% tax increase next year, because that would sure show those tax protesters. But the mayor's luck ran out when he started looking at the spending for the Council of Elders as a whole. The Corporation of the Shire spent close to $1 million in compensation and reimbursements of expenses for the council last year, which increased more than $200,000 from 3 years ago. Much of that increase came from benefits claims going from $59,000 to $176,000, and more money spent on conferences, consultants, and training. The mayor smirked at the report that showed he was the highest paid elder on the council last year, with $155,000 in pay. He was also the most expensive in total, with $37,000 in taxable benefits, $1,300 in cell phone costs, and $15,000 for conferences, totaling to $210,000. Each of the other 12 elders on the council were paid $48,000 in salary for their part-time jobs, and the ones who earned it the most were Councillor Billings and Bazootle, since they had the best attendance last year, missing only 1 meeting each. As one on the many public sector sunshine listers, the mayor had to prove he was worth his cost too. A similar situation was happening across the public sector for the 2,304 sunshine listers who had to prove their worth this year, up from the 2,099 last year. The Shire's president, Charlotte of Yates, received nearly $438,000 in pay and benefits for managing the university's multi-year million-dollar deficits. The president of Conestoga College earned a bit more with $496,000 in pay, while he purchased homeless hotels for his international cash cows with Conestoga's hundreds of millions of dollars. The Shire's hospital also had 326 sunshine listers, along with 408 workers with the Corporation of the Shire and the 211 police officers. The benefit of being a sunshine lister is your large paycheck protects you from the inflationary cost of the carbon tax. Just like Lloyd of the Longfields, these 2,304 sunshine listers can fill their gas tanks without feeling it in their wallets. As for those who aren't sunshine listers, such as the minimum wage earners downtown, they will have to wait for their raises. Ontario's minimum wage will raise later this year to $17.20 per hour. This small 3.9% increase will help everyone else pay for the 23% increase in the carbon tax. Can Carly of Klassen and the Elder Elves do anything about the housing cost crisis? And will the carbon tax get axed? Stay tuned here to see. This video is brought to you by people who like, share, and subscribe to this channel. You can also support my work by buying me a coffee.